Welcome to the TFO podcast, where guests get to give their thoughts, feelings, and opinions on a variety of subjects. This podcast is hosted by your very own Stacy Cook, and as always, sponsored by Fool's Guide Life Coaching. Follow me on all social media platforms. So give it up for our guest today. I know school seems like it's going to take 1,000 years and all this stuff.
It's going to go by anyway.
It's going to go by anyway.
That's right.
And
what are you going to do? My daughter went back to school after kind of running through that whole rummage back and forth. I don't want to, and it's too much. And the time's going to go by now. Mm-hmm. Anyway, now she's, I think, a few months away from getting her nursing degree.
Good for her. Yeah.
I'm super happy with that. And now my son's wanting to go back to school now, which is, again, she's inspired him. And so sometimes that you need that, and I'm glad that happens, but I think that's the piece that when you are dedicated and disciplined, eventually you will see that. It doesn't always happen right away, but you will see the reaps from that sowing of doing that.
Man, we're talking about all this positivity. Tell me about the time you failed, and then how did you come back from that?
Well, I think the piece that I shared with you a little bit ago in regards to, I didn't really get into too much detail about unanswered prayers, but 2007, I think it was, I was already, in my opinion, very good maintenance guy. I had a lot of welding experience and been in charge of a couple areas and backup advisor. I applied for a position to be the advisor. I was very confident that I was going to get it. I'd been doing it for so long. I knew the SAP systems. I literally was, I think, maybe too confident, because a couple of times I said in the meeting, if I don't get this, I'm still a specialist at that time, which would be the top level that was getting paid. And I didn't get it. I was devastated. I was mad. I talked about quitting because I thought this company just doesn't want me. You know, if I've done all these things and they gave it to somebody else and that had no experience on top of that, I felt like. So I really took that to heart, and part of the feedback was from leadership was, one, you came across as arrogant. Two, you told us 3 different times in 3 different meetings that if you don't get this job, you're okay. You didn't say you wanted this job. And those were all factors that kind of go into saying, hey, that you were young, you know, you were in your late 20s, you thought you knew it all, and ain't nobody gonna tell you because you're making all this big money anyway. And so I took that a lot in. Over the next 6 months, I really started focusing on, okay, I gotta change. I gotta start learning to be more humble. I started to focus on how do I show myself and share to HR that I want that job more than anything. And within the next 6 months, a new job came open in project engineering, and it was a construction coordinator role. When I read that whole expectations of what it was like everything that I wanted to do, plus more that I didn't know yet. So it was honestly something that I took as a failure that I had and turned it into something positive, but it didn't happen overnight. Right. And 2, I'm glad that those 6 months helped me kind of, you know, feel like you were slapped around, kind of, you know, punched in the gut type feeling, because I took that and said, hey, you need to change your attitude. And when we think about personal egos, which is a huge issue when you think about leadership, is can you be humble? Can you truly be somebody that just wants to be a team member, not a team leader? Yeah. And so from that perspective, I took that into that new role, and I learned so much. So I think it was almost 6+ years I was in that role, that I went from thinking I knew a lot about welding to now learning about structures and concretes and foundations and rebar sizes and high power voltage and underground, construction and slopes and, air in concrete and just, I could go on and on things that just fascinated me. And I felt like I was going back into college. And I took that as something that I said, hey, you know what? I'm glad I didn't get that role.
Blessing.
Yeah. It was an unanswered prayer because it was about 3 plus, maybe 4 more years, and I think that other role eventually was eliminated. That other advisor role went into a full type of maintenance, got restructured with the ACE, I think, that came in. But I ended up really kind of thinking that I never, I never really, people will say you can say you lost, or you can say you learned something. And to me, it wasn't a loss in that role. It was a lesson learned. And so you can say it was a failure, but to me, I didn't fail. I still succeeded. I learned something, and it made me better.
Life is full of lessons, right?
Correct.
And that definitely was one of them. Give you a couple more. I'm gonna keep you all day. What is something you regret spending time doing? Like you thought that this was my thing. I'm gonna develop myself and turn into this, and come to find out that just wasn't it. Did you ever have any of that?
Yes, I had a lot of that. Those were lessons learned. I was horrible in soccer and I loved it at the same time. I rolled my ankles no end to no end, and tried to pick up playing softball late in my life, and eventually got the scar that I have. There's a lot of things that I regret, but I think that there's things that happen for reasons that we don't understand. So I would say that was a lesson. I regret not working harder when I was younger, not trying to get so much into my education. I regret not buying Bitcoin when I could have.
We all.
No,
you do like me and buy it late.
I bought some, but a lot of these guys knew that I had a lot of Tesla. I had quite a bit of Amazon, a lot of Amazon, back in the late 90s when it first was coming out. And I sold it after it had doubled in price, but I bought it like at $19 and sold it at 35.
If we all had hindsight, I had Facebook, I had Twitter, all those things at the very beginning, Walmart.
But they would charge me like $50 back then to make a trade. And so, there's a lot of things that you could go on that you regret, but I think the challenge with those things is that if you dwell on it too much, it can become just a painful memory. And so I truly, there's that whole story of learning to be in that engine room of the boat and going into the next bay and closing the door and just sealing it. And if I try to keep this door open to the engine room, then it's going to flood into my today.
Exactly.
And so I think that's the big piece that I tried to say, hey, I know that it's in the past. I try to close the door. Human nature kind of comes in, but if I'm so focused on just making sure that today's a good day, then today will be a good day. And if I worry too much about tomorrow, then I'm not going to be good on today.
Yeah.
And so I really tried to tell myself, and what I do is I write a lot of my action items for the day, and I even if it's something small. If it's a phone call I need to make, I try to write it, and then I like checking it off, because then if I have a whole list of things that I did, then I feel good.
Yeah,
I feel
accomplished,
productive.
right?
And so if I didn't carry or 2 or 3 things, then I put those on tomorrow's list. And then I know there's a couple things I want to have on Friday, so I'll put my days onto that. And then when I get that all done, then I'll have even that in there. And so then part of my schedules on those things too is I'll even put a time in it to write in my journal. So then I do that, and I keep a journal of my thoughts and my feelings, things that I want to try to get done, some self-reflection, mostly things that help me keep myself inspired.
Funny story I had in here is one of the questions. How do you stay inspired? And you just answered that question very well, right?
Well, I
Yeah.
didn't know that piece. But
No, I think that's great because everybody doesn't do that, right? Everybody has their own ways to do it, but that seems like a really good way to
Hey,
stay on top of how you
I will
do it,
say,
right?
I will say, if I look back at my journals 10 years ago and read them, which I have, I'm blown away. I am blown away, especially when I have my goals written down, some of them, or things that I had saying, hey, you know, you want to make, which I even said that I had way back in it, you want to make $6.25 an hour. I was making 3 something.
Right.
And then when I tell myself back then, hey, you want to be up to 19 bucks an hour, I was making like 12 or 14. And so when I say that race is against yourself, it really is.
Mm-hmm.
It is. It shouldn't be saying, hey, well, John's making 12 and you're making 8. Then you're not racing against John. You're not. You're trying to compare yourself. And if you're not saying, well, then how do I get to 12? What do I need to do? And a lot of times that's where that mentorship comes in. When I was younger, I tried to mentor off of my brothers, people that helped me, or my mom or my dad, and eventually family members that I could confide into, and then it's spanned out further out.
So, last one, what would you tell somebody that's just starting in life? They're a teenager, they're 21, they're just getting their feet under them. What advice would you have for somebody at that age?
If they're wanting to obviously make some sort of career of themselves and be a value, the largest thing that I would think about in my personal view is find a mentor and work on the list of self-development things that you can do to better yourself, because the mentor is going to help you be held accountable. The self-development will force you to look at yourself and find things that you can do to improve, and that will help you with eventually getting a set of goals. So I know that's a multiple amount of answers.
No, that's good.
But I
right?
think, you know, having goals, have a mentor, and work on them with a list of things. And I force my kids to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I force myself to do that. Every year I write new goals, and I look at how I compared to myself to my goals before. And some of them, I don't even know how I'm going to get them. But when I get them, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I never could believe I did that. And it was like this happened, that happened, this happened. And I celebrate the little successes on the things that I have, which also makes you feel good. So you remember that.
Man, those journals are like time capsules, right? You just go back and say, you know,
Yep. I think about what I was thinking, or an idea that I had, or just either a motivational quote that I want to think about, or there's something that connects with me, or a verse that I feel like I need to repeat. There are things that help me work on me, because at the end of the day, nobody's going to care about Stacy more than Stacy.
That's right.
You know, you think that there is, but you have to be able to be the one that's disciplined and dedicated to be successful.
And if people care more about me than I do, then there's a problem.
Right.
We got a problem there.
Correct.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the time.
Yep.
All right.